So Gareth was our last invited speaker, and sadly due to COVID we had to cancel as the first lockdown was imposed. And in the 2 years since, Gareth's had his own journey, a very difficult journey, and we genuinely thought that when Gareth, we heard Gareth had cancer, that we wouldn't see him again. We're absolutely delighted.
I hope you got your money back for the wreath. Who said you got a wreath?
You do get really good money back guarantees with Amazon these days. It wasn't all lost. But we were wrong, and Gareth he's here. His presence here is a testament to his strength and to the medical profession. And I'd like you to welcome Gareth.
Hello, Indigenous people of Scotland. I've been told you haven't yet learned how to make fire, at least by the bluecoats that I have to meet in London. Don't let this bourgeois appearance fool you. I'm frae a broken home in Fountainbridge. My mother did most of the breaking of it, God bless her. She lived to 92, so I'm doing my best to get there. I had a stepfather, and he was a bit of a boor, but he made the bad mistake of marrying my mother. My father was Don Carlo Bernini, but Gareth Bernini doesn't quite work together, so I took the stepfather's name in respect to my mother, but she didn't love my stepfather. And I learned early that there was something wrong in Scottish society. Some of you may have had the same experience. I used to get marched in twos to the school to the sound of the Dam Busters march. Anyway, into the classroom. And I was good at art and good at English. Don't worry, I'm not going to be talking about myself all night. That's boring. But it's just to let you know the motivation. There was no moment of revelation. I just gravitated towards Scotland as a nation. And then as I got deeper into the arts and more successful, and working in education, I was the youngest lecturer appointed in Scotland. I think I was about 27, and I thought it was a job for life. Until the Labour government came in and changed everything and just destroyed everything that we'd built up, just for the sake of changing things and a sort of ideological attitude to education. I'm somebody who doesn't believe in exams. I think young people should be left to their own devices at school, but taught to get into groups democratically to sort out their differences. And you'll be amazed how quickly a young person gets motivated if they want to go to university, and how quickly they learn. You know how a child is like a sponge. If you take a child and put them in two households with different languages, the child will learn both languages really quickly. But the older you get, the less able you are to pick up these languages. So there was no specific moment for me where I said, I've got to be this, I've got to be that. But one day I found myself invited by Mike Russell, who'd heard about my directing work. It was a musical. I set it in the House of Commons. And the audience was built up on three sides, like the House of Commons. The Speaker's chair was used as an acting area. Steps up the back, so we could use that for declamatory things. And the Speaker's table was a dancing and acting area. Underneath was the miners' pits. And when the audience came in, they had to choose which side of the house. We asked the politics, and you would get some mealy-mouthed ones. Where's the Liberal section? And the amazing thing was that politicians got to hear of it because it was hugely successful. You know, STV broadcast about 3/4 of it. And real politicians turned up. And at one point, David Steele was sitting in his proper seat, you know, his proper common seat facing opposition. And it's all set in 1926, when King George said, you know, when the general strike collapsed, and the king said, "What a stupid way to run a revolution. Everyone knows you shoot the bobbies first." So it was built around that time, and there was David Steele sitting there next to the actor playing Lloyd George. And the actor was smart enough when he came to his speech to say, "This is what we feel about this terrible thing that's happened to the working people. And my friend here in the Liberal Party, Mr. Steele." You know, so because the audience just rose to that. It was a wonderful experience. And then Mike Russell called me in, and he said he was having trouble with Scottish National Party political broadcasts, SNP, PPBs, and would I consider directing some of them? I thought, great, chance to direct. You know, I had no idea that it might actually make me toxic as an employee with BBC or theatres in Scotland. And the first thing I did was I got some young people together and shot a party political broadcast of them against a blue screen, and then so I could turn the background into cartoon. And then there was about 2 others, but the biggest one was I got a proper movie camera and a helicopter, and we went across various castles, and I asked Sean Connery. I was born on the same block as Sean Connery in Fountain Bridge. I asked him if he would do the voiceover, and which he did. So that was the start of it. But the moment I knew that there was a change of mood in Scotland was when I got this call from the Scottish Chartered Accountants Association for their annual conference. "We'd like you to be our main speaker." I said, "I'm Gareth Wardell, I'm a theatre director. You're thinking about Gareth Wardell, the Welsh MP." "No, we're not, no, it's you." I said, who are the other speakers?" "Well, we've got Anne Gloag." I said, "Oh God, I don't know what to say. These are all heavyweights, you know." Anyway, I was the main speaker, and the place was packed. Can't remember where it was. You know, they'd been there a week. These accountants. And so I let rip with anecdotes and talks about the arts in Scotland and how they're better looked after in Europe and everything. And at the end of it, I heard myself saying, "Thank you very much indeed for inviting me. And for those of you who've been listening between the lines, I thank you doubly." Standing ovation. I went on and on and on, feet stamping. I thought, my God, they've cottoned on to the politics. You know, the politics just came naturally as a Scot. So that was, I suppose, a moment of revelation for me. It boosts your confidence. And then I started inviting the SNP as a member of every arts committee in Scotland. They would say, "Oh, we want the Labour guy, we want the guy from that union, musicians union, we need one of them." I said, "Yeah, you've missed out the SNP." And then I got the SNP onto the board of BBC a bit later on. They've not really thanked me generously since then. I hate Dad. However, it was just a natural progression. I'm not competitive. I'm known as a low-key professional. And that means I like to stand behind the camera. And all my life, on my vocation, because it's not a career in the arts. You know, you're self-employed. It's a vocation. You do it because you're good at it and you love seeing something being built and created. What I've done is I've helped other people to get a career, to get into film, to become a writer, to become a newscaster. One girl in particular, a total pain in the ass, and I had to keep shouting at her while I was directing, keep quiet with me. And I said, and she could see her getting crestfallen. I remember saying, "You've got a terrific voice, but I can't see any acting ability. You should be reading the news." Well, she has been for about 20 years. So I've had the ability to spot raw talent. Sometimes I thought it was outstanding talent, and I've been slightly wrong, and at other times I've underestimated it. But then if I knew exactly where it would go, I'd be a wealthy agent by now. That's a long answer. I'll try and shorten it.
Right, obvious question then. I thought a simple, straightforward one. Grouse Beater. What's the origins of the name Grouse Beater?
I kept looking for something that was Scots, you know, Glen, Gary, I didn't want a pseudonym, you know, I had no reason to hide. I had problems about my wife being internationally famous and me standing up saying, you know, the Secretary of State, you know, is a child molester or something like that, because that would definitely bounce back on Barbara. And both daughters have been successful. One of them's a chip off the old block. The one that looks 100% Italian, 6 foot tall, long dark hair. Men go weak at the knees when they see her. She's studying philosophy just now, but she's a theatre director, and she's got a new production in Glasgow in about a month. She played Mary Queen of Scots in Liz Lochhead's play in London. She's tall, you see. And Emma, the oldest, she took to teaching, didn't like the state system, and has got a very successful Montessori school. So, what was the question? So, I was looking for things like Glengarry, anything with a Scots affiliation. And then I suddenly remembered the grouse. It's a pretty lowly bird. You know, it lives on the ground. It gets beaten about a lot by house jocks, and Scots will say, "Get off the Grouse land!" You know, they're standing there with a shotgun. "You're Scots and I'm Scots. This is our land. Get off it!" You know, so you get the. So it had symbolism for me, and it's not an eagle. It's not a predatory bird. It's not going to kill anything, and it seemed to work. But if people read I hate the word blog, it's an ugly word. If they read the essay site, they would see you know, about Grouse Beater. My name's actually there. And I've had one or two people who've spotted who it must be, you know, because I've been talking about art, or Barbara's got an exhibition or something. "Are you Barbara Rayson?" "Yes." "What do you do?" "I walk behind and let the Duke of Edinburgh." My other problem, of course, has been that as I've grown older, I start to look like Billy Connolly, and if I stop at traffic lights, there's somebody will come over, tap on the window. Billy, geese your autograph, Billy." "I'm on holidays now, geese a break." So the grouse is something Scottish. That's all it is. And then, of course, you'll get the unions to say, thinking they're original, they'll say, "Do you do a lot of beating, pal? Eh? Aha!" Thank you. I've never heard that one before. Blocked. Frederick Lindsay, yeah.
So, if you're, that age, 1987, this Brond, it was a political thriller, and it ended up on Channel 4.
1987, it was broadcast in 1987. So you produced that? Was it produced?
Yeah,
Co-wrote, produced, and
chose the director, got the money from Channel 4, chose the main actors.
does anybody remember? Does anybody remember seeing it? I used to come home and watch this thing, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. As a political thriller, it's about Scotland and the Secret Service. It's just that it was a gobsmacking thing, and you can find it on YouTube, and the book's out there. You know, recommend the book.
What was it called again?
Brond.
Brond,
But-
B-R-O-N-D?
Yeah,
Yeah.
by Frederick Lindsay.
He chose the name to be as close to James Bond as possible, you know, but about real politics and how the Scottish political system is completely manipulated by London, including special branch police. The BBC wouldn't do it. They wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. But Jeremy Isaacs had started Channel 4 and years earlier I had helped a writer because he was almost bankrupt, and suddenly became an editor, commissioning editor at Channel 4. And he didn't commission me, he commissioned a major novel by an English novelist that starts off with a priest in bed and a cat and white, you know, this young boy. And of course, the whole, you know, as soon as the backers looked at the script, it collapsed. So this poor, his name's David Benedictus, an Etonian, and and his son is Mon, who was the QC with Joanna Cherry when they took on the government. Remember, they won that case? Yeah, he was the guy who beat the fox to death that was caught in his face. And for some reason, it didn't call the RSPCA. He just, I don't know. He was wearing a kimono at the time. I don't know why he told people, but he felt that to go public with it. So it was David Benedictus. Anyway, his job was on the line because they spent a ton of money at Channel 4 and his project collapsed. And he remembered me. He phoned me up in panic. And he said, Gareth, have you got anything? And I had two. I was working on a study of male aggression on women. Now, I don't write a university thesis, I write scripts. So you have to wrap it up in some kind of commercial cloak, you know, apparel. And so I made it a private detective who crossed his own moral and ethical line, fell in love with the widow of his murdered brother, and hit on her. I mean, there's a scene where she goads him, and it's about almost every kind of man I could think of, from the feckless, unfaithful husband through to the tough businessman, right to the pimp, a pimp with the arm bar up his sleeve. And I thought, no, I won't do that one. But Brond, I've got that. And they'll never know the politics in it. These London boys. I heard some odd things. When they greenlit it, it was £2.5 million ago. I was just left the BBC, and the head BBC said, Gareth, you've got a family, what are you going to do? I said, well, I made some dramas around the world for Channel 4, and they've given me £2.5 million to make a movie. I'm leaving. So they couldn't believe it. Oh, the scale of it, Gareth. I said, well, I've been trying to give you drama work about Scotland. You won't look at it. Nothing. See, Channel 4 have picked it up. And when it was all over, unlike unlike Local Hero and Trainspotting, it wasn't dubbed when it went to America or subtitled, which was quite amazing because it's set in Glasgow. With an audacious start where this well-dressed man walks past a little red-haired boy in the middle of Glasgow near the university, hanging over the bridge over the river. And a student, who's been out jogging, stops and says, "Hey son, be careful, if you fall in there, it's toxic." And this man, well-dressed man, walks by and puts his hand on the little boy's behind and throws him over the bridge to his death. That's the start of it. And winks at the student. Goes round the corner. The student is absolutely mortified. And he runs after the guy. And he's disappeared when he goes round the corner, just into thin air. Runs back, and the little boy is also gone. There's the bollards that the bridge sitting on. So you see the boy first. He's obviously dead. And later transpires that the boy is the son of an IRA hitman, and that's the British state police are trying to flush out the father because they have the right to kill people to do that. So it had all these threads in it. So that was Frederick Lindsay's Brond, and it's still in the top 100 best novels ever written in Scotland.
Do you think they would film it now? Do you think any UK?
I've got the rights back. I was smart enough to say to Channel 4, you get 10 years and no more. I don't actually have much of a business head on me. If I want to make money, I give it away.
Yeah, but politically, the stuff that's in it, do you think they would shoot that now? Any of them?
I don't think Channel 4 would do it. No, because once Michael Grade became was it chairman of Channel 4, he just turned it into another commercial type station. We still get 10% of commissions, but as BBC Scotland executive said to me one day, we can't do stuff in Scotland. You just don't have the talent, or the producers, or the directors. Yeah, I was there. And and I said, "I'm one. You're talking to one." I can tell you 10 others that are out there. If you just let me, Barbara's the same. She can't remember the last time the Royal Academy in London, which represents all of the UK, the Royal Scottish Academy of Art only represents people in Scotland. Well, they can be English as long as they're really good painters. The Royal Academy, of course, being the colonial institution, represents all of the UK and Northern Ireland. Did they choose Scots actors, Scots painters, artists? Barbara's got, I think, 2 elected. You get elected by your peers. And as Barbara said, I would never be made a Royal Academician if I hadn't gone down to London after leaving the Edinburgh School of Art and had an exhibition. She was fully formed as a painter. She's a Crieff lassie. Her father was Lord Provost and SNP, one of the earliest, James Ray, and well liked by all accounts. So she makes plain that her life would have been difficult as an artist if she hadn't gone down to London. The gallery owner down at Cork Street, as soon as he saw her works, "I'll represent you." Right, how much to get? 20%? No. You get 20%. She's the business, one of the business head. I mean, my lack of competitiveness means, and the Italian side of me means that I can take people a long time before my temper breaks. When it does break, you better stand well back. But, I can be pushed a long distance. But my wife taught me how not to suffer fools gladly.
You and the Aries.
Eh?
And you and the Aries.
What's the Aries?
Starshine.
Oh, Scorpio. Yeah, Scorpio.
That answer it?
Nah, I'm not sure. Royal Academy exhibition, one of our giant canvases on the wall. And I like to stand behind people to listen to what they say because they don't know who I am. Anyway, one of them spotted Barbara was there in the crowd, and Barbara came over with a glass of wine. The place is packed down there, all the celebrities and everything. The women said, Barbara, I hadn't met her before in her life, but you get, that intimate thing. Barbara, that's one of the most magnificent paintings I have ever seen. It's just so redolent of the famine fields of the west of Ireland. Oh, mind you, if I was painting it, I would paint it differently. And Barbara, I went, woo! Barbara just turned slowly, like Jack Benny, did a slow burn turn and said, I'm sure you would paint it differently, but it wouldn't be hanging up in the Royal Academy. So she saved my life a few times.
So from the BBC to Channel 4 to Los Angeles. So what took you to LA, and why the hell did you come back?
Well, I didn't give up house here. I couldn't give up my home here. We didn't take the kids over. So Barbara was over there over here most of the time, and I was over there, and she was worried I was having affairs over there. I probably could have, because there's a terrible strata of single women with mothers, and then somebody like me comes along who's got heritage. Oh, European heritage. I'd gone out to Los Angeles much earlier for the BBC to make a short news piece, documentary news piece. And we went up on the bluff where they shot that ET sequence. It gets, the spaceship goes away and you see all the lights in the distance. The thing, you could hear the little ET go, thrashing around looking for safety. And so we arrived with all the camera crew and everything and the wagons, and I said, right, tomorrow, 7 o'clock, start at 1, chuck wagon over there, one, crane there and that, put the camera, number 2 camera, put it with it, make sure you got that and this, that. So I went through all these directions. Next morning, first on the set, because I'm the guy wearing the big jacket, the director. Nothing had changed, everything was still in the car park. So I thought, right, I've got to establish my authority. I went ballistic. Oh, please, please, said this guy, step forward. Oh, please, please don't castigate us, Mr. Wardell. It's Wardell, but you can call me Gareth. Right, Gareth. We could not understand a word you said. And then suddenly, you hear Americans saying quite generally, you'll have heard this, by the way, from other people who've been to Los Angeles, you have a wonderful accent. It is just so authoritative. And you think, nobody in Scotland's ever said that to me, ever. They've told me not to speak the way I speak. I spent 20 years flattening my accent, making sure my shoes are polished and I'm wearing the right jacket on a Saturday to get access to the next level of the middle class. And these Americans are telling me I'm a fantastic, interesting individual. Not even my mother said that. I asked my mother why she called me Gareth and gave me a Welsh name. She said, well, I didn't want people to shorten it. I didn't want them to give you a nickname. I said, Mum, you've called me Gary all my life. Parents screw you up. I'm not sure if I'm answering your questions, but I told you I'm not keeping it serious. I didn't come here to lecture anybody. I get lectured every day on Twitter. Twitter! Who the hell wants to join Twitter? Debating. It's just terrible. It doesn't have that kind of capacity. I'm here, I can see your faces, you can see me, you can tell by the tone of my voice whether there's sincerity in it, whether I'm trying to fool you or not, whether I'm half remembering something, got the facts wrong. It's very difficult on Twitter to be able to do that, and it takes a long time to spot who's a phony SNP supporter or independence, they're a unionist. Scotland forever, and they come on and say, why are you doing all these divisive things? So it's useless for that. It's good for passing short, quick information or news items. That is why I switched it from personal opinion to a news bite, my Twitter account, to literally put anything about Scotland, plus some humour and wit, and then creating the proud purveyor of Indigenous news to Indigenous people since 2014. I didn't come up with the Indigenous people, by the way. I was in Taos, in New Mexico, talking to a Navajo Indian, and he was making a silver eagle for me, bola. And I got talking to him about the reservation and how they're third-class American citizens. And as he's fashioning this thing, beautiful craft work, he said, "You're Indigenous." I said, "Pardon?" He said, "You're Scottish?" "Yeah." "You're ruled by another country?" "Yeah." "You're Indigenous." It's like taking a blind off your eyes, you start to see it. And of course, if you dare mention anything that equates to American Indians, it's outrageous to the George Galloways or the Unionist press. How dare you? Your life's totally different. And you think, yeah, well, I'm not living on a dusty reservation driving a pickup, but it's not that far different. We've got our parliament, but they're removing the powers from it, as you know. I mean, we've reached an absolutely, trying not to depress people, my whole reason for writing is to kill despair. Hope is everything. Hope plus it can happen, we can do it. We just have to say we can do it. Some of us can do it better than others, but we can actually achieve. And the whole despair attitude that you get, you can see it now, because the SNP have accommodated the colonials' agenda.
Yep.
You don't want us to have a referendum? Okay, we won't have it right now. We'll do it when you give us permission. Pardon? Well, we're not constitutionally colonised yet, but we're colonised language, culture, economically, in every other way.
Here we are. We have their constitution, not ours.
Yeah. So I've always seen my job to say, I was told I was eloquent, I was told I was articulate, so that's my skill. That's what I've got. But the SNP didn't employ me to write that. I offered my services. And I said, I'm good at writing, don't send me around upstairs with bloody pamphlets, sticking them through letterboxes. I've got my backs. I get a pain in my back.
Let me read the pamphlets.
Let me write the pamphlets. Let me startle people with things that they didn't expect. So the referendum betrayed the working class of Scots. The working class of Scotland voted yes. Not necessarily because they thought Elysium North will be created the day after, but because they said, look at what we've got. It has to be better. Let's vote for something that gives us the opportunity to make it better. It would have been an emotional thing like that. So they get the whole of Glasgow, Greater Glasgow, Dundee, North Lanarkshire. You just get these swathes. And so even when someone who's a supporter comes onto Twitter and says, well, we lost, I said, no, we didn't. No, we didn't. 53% of Scots, Indigenous Scots, voted yes. But we used a local franchise, a local election franchise. So everyone was welcome, including a few thousand Chinese students. And what were they going to do? Oh, I'll lose my grant. I'll lose my chance at the university if it's an independent nation. No, I can vote no. The porter at the hotel in London I'm in bought a flat in Edinburgh, Gareth. Yeah, where you live. Yeah, terrific. Really cheap compared to here. Terrific. Got my son up there. I'll not be voting for those bloody idiots, the SNP. No, those are. So you get all that, and you think, oh, there's something wrong here. Of the 55% who voted no, we know a great majority switched at the last minute, the last few days, and they admitted the vow, the fraudulent, illegal, it should never have been put up. And nor should those Labour politicians coming up from London, remember? With that wonderful guy with his chariot, our colonial masters. That's one of the great moments. I mean, that's history, a piece of history. What the hell were they doing? Coming to Scotland to talk us down.
That's when they got the polls to say that we were winning. That's why they got
And
the polls.
that's right, we were. At one point, At one point, Alex Salmon had us at 58%. You could hear. I've been in, because of the kind of people I mix with, you know.
That and the pension
And Barbara,
in
the cabinet office, when the panic broke. We got to do something, and so you get,
You know what I could do?
the worst thing. An Englishman is not a Scotsman's worst enemy. Another Scotsman is a Scotsman's worst enemy. And so you had Hatless Gordon. You know, first of all, when the SNP won the landslide, phoning up the other leaders of the other parties to try and organise a coup, to undermine it in some way. You know, that he wouldn't speak to reporters when they all rushed round him when he was getting off the plane onto his car because they wanted to ask him what he thought. He just turned his back on them. He couldn't speak. I mean, he's not a guy that relates to people in any sort of warm way anyway. He isn't that kind of character. But you had that kind of thing happening, and the 55%, they were cheated because 37% of them, this is the Edinburgh University study. I'm not making this up. Sometimes I can't be bothered telling people on Twitter, could you give me a link? They don't say, please, give me a link to that, you know. And I say, no, I'm desperate for the toilet. I've got to go out shopping to get some message before my wife comes back. I haven't taken the dishes out of the dishwasher, you know. And 37% of the 55% wanted far greater powers for Scotland, short of autonomy. You know, the full Monty worried them because the fear mongering works. It works. Doubt. You know, all you need to. I'll tell you how it works. It took me a long time to accept invitations to talk to anybody. Roddy McLeod will tell you with the PRISM thing. It took him 6 months. They kept saying, I'll not do it if you've got cameras on. Is it radio? No. He says, we'll edit it. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't like this whole personality thing, you know. There are supporters who become celebrities. Anyway, the point of that was that the Edinburgh University made absolutely plain that the scaremongering had worked on a lot of folk. And the best example I give you was the first talk I went to was at my local Edinburgh group. And I prepared everything. After that, I decided I wouldn't. I would only do question and answer, right? This kind of thing, where people could join in, whatever. I wouldn't do prepared lectures because there's a good chance I'd be saying the same thing as the previous guest. Anyway, it went well. And afterwards, I wrote and said, thank you to the chairman, thank you for inviting me. And he was English, and he wrote back and said, it was terrific. It's just that we knew everything already that you talked about. Bam. Just a little thing like that, you know, can just undermine. You've got to be really tough. You have to be tough for anything like this. Tough as Alex Salmond, saying, no, I'll come back to politics. It's my right. You can make a fool of me. You could be derisory. You can be derogatory. But my right is as same as anyone else. And we have to let people know we were there. And if it had been a franchise in which, like any other nation, incomers were not allowed to vote on a constitutional matter, we would be an independent country now. It's nothing to do with disliking English people, right? I don't hate English. I envy them. I envy them because they have a voice in the world and they sit on the United Nations. I dislike some of the bluecoats that I'm forced to work with. That's a different matter. The ones that said to my wife, Barbara, I take it if you do become independent, you'll resign from the Royal Academy. There you go. Colonialism. So it's difficult convincing people that they're colonized because they feel free. They don't see how they're being manipulated, how their choices, their options are closed down. And because I mix, I have to mix with money men, big time money men, you know, who sit there talking to me and then ask me which of the women around them I want for the night. I said, that's not what I'm here for. By the way, that was BBC. I'm writing about that in SH2. So, oh yeah. They got off with a lot on this one. So on the next one, they certainly are not. So I was around too when that Savile guy was, I mean, the BBC was just terrible. But it started early. Lord Reith walking into his office and finding his secretary in flagrante across his desk. Well, that must have been a nightmare. Lord John Reith, Scotsman on the make. Sorry, see my mercurial mind's everywhere.
I'm saying there's many of them on the make.
Yeah, you know, you can choose the shopping that you want, you can go see the cinema you want, you can choose the car you can afford. That's just freedom. No, not really.
Can I just ask, why are we so surprised? Because unionism throughout history, over the Commonwealth, that's exactly what they did to other countries.
Yeah,
so
right.
Why are we expected to say, I say, old chaps can just play the right way to do things and give us an election and go and be nice and dim. Ireland had a war. They blew up half of England. In the end, they had to go to the table.
They're prepared to die for the country. Scots die for other people's countries.
Yeah, well, it's a sad thing, isn't it?
It's not for nothing Edinburgh said no, with all the public schools it's got there. Fettes that refuses to teach Scottish history. So you come across things like that, and it just starts to worry you. And you say, well, that's my history. You know, like the BBC said to me, they didn't want to do any costume dramas, fairy pieces. I said, we invented that kind of novel. What do you think Sunset Song was? Anyway.
So, another dilemma,
Yeah.
the BBC still just talk SNP bad, Scotland bad, and yet the polls are showing the SNP are going to have to bag it and the biggest win at the local elections coming, and they've been doing that for the last 10 years, and still the BBC are not changing the track. It's not working.
Well, I've always taken it for granted that people will prefer an inept government of their choice than a super efficient one that's imposed on them from another country. You choose, the lesser of two evils. And I've said to people, I'm going to find it difficult voting for the SNP. Really difficult. Oh, you're bitter, Gareth. Hold on a minute. Let's have a sense of justice here. They didn't actually call me anti-Semitic. I only found that out recently. They forgot to tell the public. They threw me out of the SNP. I wasn't a member. That's how good the administration is. They threw me out of the SNP for not turning up to a kangaroo court. And I sat down with Barbara. I said, should I go along to that? She said, you're kidding. All you do is send them money. You're a private citizen. See, she's much tougher than me. She says, they'll just humiliate you. I said, well, I'll need some explanation because there's nothing in there. I said, I didn't even know she was Jewish. I said, my best friend, Benjamin Samuelson. He's annoyed because people keep saying, do you need anything special to eat? I'm not Jewish! I didn't know Wolfson was Jewish, and it didn't matter to me. She was not the subject of that essay. She was mentioned at the end because she was the one behind the foghorn talking to the women who had been taken out their work, lost 3 days' work. English supporters bust up to fatten up the crowd. That was the only reason I mentioned her. It was about the GMB, which was, in my view, a misogynist union. And unfortunately, I didn't know that at that time they were being investigated by a leading English QC for sexual harassment and misogyny. And the report found against the GMB. So I was right. It's a sense. You get a sense about something. You say, that something's not right here. You've got to find the right words to articulate it without insulting or libel. And the head of the GMB, Roche, R-O-A-C-H-E. I get this Twitter. You effing seeing that absolute crap that you have said about this woman now. She didn't call me anti-Semitic. She called me a pain in the ass. It was Gary Smith, we Glaswegian second in charge. We decided I must be dangerous. We have to shut him up. She's Jewish. He's talking about her there fighting for the anti-Semitism in the union. That's not strong enough. Now, only 30 people had read that sentence. When my wife, when Barbara said, that's a bit weak, Gareth. If that's a compliment, it's a bit weak. Oh, I said, you're right enough. But I'd sent a copy to her for the right of reply. So only 30 people had read it in my obscure blog site. And so I changed it and made it much stronger. And then just before this wave of, came in. Anyway, Roach wrote this absolutely abusive email. And I said, which part is anti-Semitic? And he wrote, I wouldn't read it! I hadn't read it. So there was the attack. And then you get to the SNP disciplinary committee. We would go along to the IHRA, a little Jewish group in Glasgow, and it's auto-suggestion. If you say, what do you think of that? Well, it looks like an attack on the union, but I can see he doesn't like attacking on unions because he thinks they're the cornerstone of democracy. Okay, but if you go along and say, do you think that's anti-Semitic, that line? Well, it could be. Yeah, it could. Well, it might not be. Depends on the guy. Have you spoken to the guy? Well, you see, they threw me out because I didn't turn up. But I sent a long letter in which I mentioned Uncle Jaime Bierman, the numerals. And they ignored that. The National Secretary ignored it. And that's when I thought there's something wrong with SNP here. Why are they doing this to their own kith and kin, Anyway, Mike Russell had an inquiry and said, Gareth, it's been terrible injustice. I said, so what are you going to do about it? He said, oh, I don't have any power as president. And Chapman, what's Chapman's? Douglas Chapman, he tried. I think he's quite an honourable guy. Came to see me with a bottle of champagne. I said, do I hit you with that? Or do we drink it? Are you here to tell me some good news? I'm here to tell you, Gareth, nobody wants to do anything. I said, well, are you expecting me to vote for the SNP? So do you understand what the SNP is doing? Anything but securing Scotland's autonomy. We can actually withdraw from the Union tomorrow. They've got, I mean, absolutely legally.
Yes. Yep.
But we have a First Minister who is the major impediment to that ideal, because she's just scared. That's all it is. She's just, it's a fear of the unknown. The same as those percentages who voted no that weren't unionists. Oh, the future. No, you know, I'm a man of habit. What will happen? Well, nothing will happen, at least not for 2 or 3 years, because we'll have to negotiate with our opposites in London, and then we'll have to bring that back to our Parliament to see if our parliamentarians accept what's on the table. And if it's good, we'll put it back to the people again. If it's bad, we'll have to go back and renegotiate. Now, it isn't just my view, it's normal practice. You don't just withdraw with an announcement, you have worked out a new accord for a new relationship with your neighbour. You have that ready, so that nobody can come back at you and say, oh, you're being insular. You say, no. We just want a more equitable way of living with you guys, right? And we don't want you to, you don't need to put tanks on a country these days to subdue it. If you own the press, if you own the economy, if your language is the same as theirs, you don't need to put tanks in the street. And that's what we're fighting. It really is. So I look at the SNP and you know that old saying, they've lost their way. But they were guided, of course. You know, I hate all my professional life I've learned, especially with touchy actors and especially touchy writers, sensitive writers, not to deal in personalities. But in politics, inevitably, when you look for the reason things are not progressing, they're actually regressing, you end up with a desk and somebody sitting behind it. And I'm afraid that is Nicola Sturgeon. She can tell us all she likes that she's utterly dedicated to independence and has been all her life. Well, we have to answer, thank you. Could you step aside because you do not have the capabilities or the statecraft to secure it?